Can I say welcome? We're already doing way better than last year's presentation where we accidentally presented during the U of M MSU game.
Don't
on this
do
stage.
that.
Don't do that. So thank you everybody for coming. You beat the 4 people we had last year, so thanks. And welcome to Haunted Mitten Podcast presentation on Ann Arbor. We're so happy you could make it on a Sunday night. I'm sure some of you are familiar with us, but if not, my name is Kay. This is Krista. And together we host Haunted Mitten, a podcast about all the weird things that go on in Michigan, of which there is a plethora. We've been doing this since 2019 and have 4 seasons of the show under our belt. The 5th season is going on right now. The 2nd episode actually came out yesterday. And you can find it wherever you get podcasts, which seems to be changing all the time, where you can get podcasts. Before we start, we thought we would give a little background about us, in case anyone is unfamiliar. So I guess we'll start from the beginning. I grew up in a haunted house, or what my family and I, minus my father, believed was a haunted house. Footsteps when no one else was home. My brother once heard somebody say "help me" when he was in the shower, which is fun. Strange scents, especially after my mother passed away, just like her perfume would still linger, or like her favorite flowers were gardenias. You'd smell them every once in a while. And growing up, I was terrified of the paranormal. I wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. My mother loved The X-Files, loved Sightings, loved all those early 90s shows. Hated all of it, hid from all of it. And then I saw a UFO when I was walking home from church one day. And that kind of changed everything. So I have been actively researching the paranormal and the supernatural and just weird stuff since I was a teenager years ago. But I guess started taking that really seriously probably in 2011 or so. So it's been a while. So I'm doing this for a while. And then, like I said, we've been doing the podcast since 2019. So semi-professionally for however many years that is, because the pandemic took years. I don't know what year it is anymore.
Time no longer has meaning.
Yeah, Krista.
I'm kind of the opposite. I've always loved the paranormal. I was watching Sightings and X-Files with my mother. And my first experience was when I was about 4. It was the first Christmas I can actually remember. It's one of my earliest memories. And I got up super early, as children do, on Christmas morning. And I looked out into the living room, and there was this weird sort of black mass just kind of hovering around the Christmas tree and playing with it. And I thought, that's weird. But I shared a room with my brother, so I checked. He was still in bed. We had a Jack and Jill bathroom with my parents. So went through the bathroom, looked in their room. They were both in bed. So I thought it must be a burglar. And I jumped back in bed, and I hid until morning, completely expecting to wake up in the morning and find the TV and the stereo missing, because we had stereos back in the 80s, and they were very nice. But no, I was the last one to wake up, actually. And nothing wrong. It was just a normal Christmas morning. And being 4, I decided, I guess that was Santa Claus. And Santa Claus was terrifying. And then years later, my mother confessed that a little boy had died in the house. She had been told it was in a fire, but we found out actually last year.
Yeah, it was
last
very,
year,
very recently.
Very recently, because Kalamazoo is a smaller town than I thought it was. And my brother knows the son of the guy who lived across the street from us at the time. And we're going back over 35 years. And he said, no, the boy was electrocuted. Possibly in our former bedroom.
Yay!
So maybe that's what I saw. No idea. But just odd little things like that have popped up in my life ever since. So that's how I got started.
Yep. And then we've been friends for
a while.
Yep, amount of years. And just kind of shared the love of paranormal with each other for pretty much that whole time, and then finally decided in 2018 we were gonna write a book, and then I was like, hey, let's do a podcast. And we've been doing that ever since.
Yeah. And the
Sweet.
library started opening its Fifth Avenue studios at the time. So everything came together beautifully.
It
and
did.
the studios are right there behind you.
They're right there, and they're wonderful. Take advantage if you can.
Absolutely. It's free.
So we talked about Ann Arbor back in season 1. In fact, I believe it was our debut episode.
It was.
Yeah. And since then, we've gathered some new info that we are more than excited to share with you. If we have time, we'll have a small Q&A at the end of the presentation if there's anything you'd like to share, anything you want to ask. Otherwise, here we go.
Yeah. So we usually like to start with a little bit of history. I especially like to start with a little bit of history. And according to Wikipedia, because it's weirdly a great resource on things, quote, in about 1774, the Potawatomi founded 2 villages in the area of what is now Ann Arbor, but we actually have no substantial resources to back that up, but it kind of tracks. I'm not going to really question that. We do know that the area was settled by various peoples for hundreds of years. This is a very popular area for thousands of years, actually. And Ann Arbor itself was settled by frontiersmen John Allen and Elisha Walker Rumsey in 1824, and allegedly named for both of their wives who were named Anne. That's the popular story, and it's kind of sweet, and it's entirely possible.
It's really nice.
Yeah. And Ann Arbor was made the county seat in 1827 and was even a contender for the state capital once they decided that Detroit was too close to the enemy, aka the English. But obviously we lost out to Lansing. And Ann Arbor actually set aside land to build the capital, but U of M decided they were going to move out here from Detroit, and they bought the land a few years later. And then they got another boost when the Michigan Central Railroad built a depot and decided to come through here. And you'll be hearing a little bit more about that building later. And Ann Arbor has always been more diverse and liberal than a lot of other parts of Michigan, especially once the railroad came through. And that's led to, residents participating in several movements throughout history. Probably a lot of people here were part of that too, including like the civil rights, anti-Vietnam rallies, and then even in the last few years we've had many, many rallies.
Yeah.
Ann Arbor in a nutshell.
I was going to say, working downtown, you get a front row seat to the many rallies that we have.
Absolutely.
But who could forget to include the night a freight train speeding through Ann Arbor derailed and hit the bank building at Huron in Maine. Surely not us. Yeah. There's a plaque dedicated to it. You can go see.
There's a picture.
Yeah, it's got like old-timey photos of it. It's cool, but also that sucks. The train derailed. One night in August 1927, people awoke to the screeching of train brakes and the smashing of a building. While trying to move the train with a faulty motor up the hill near what is now Veterans Park, the workers uncoupled cars in order to make the train lighter. 4 cars decided they weren't going up the hill and careened all the way back down until they hit a bank. Somehow, not a single person was killed. The conductor jumped out of the train around Ashley Street, and it was so late at night that the few people still downtown were inside. It is a miracle that nothing worse happened.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I've heard allegedly you can hear like the screech of the train at night, but I don't know. No one was hurt, so.
Yeah. I mean, we're also near train tracks, so.
Yeah, the trains go through here all the time.
It's pretty common.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of strange history throughout Ann Arbor, and we're just going to touch on a little bit of it. And right now we're going to get into the ghost stories, which are the most fun, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so let's begin with a building that you may have driven by. It's not up there. It's over there. Kim, look at this. That you may have driven by 1,000 times before, but paid little to no attention to. It sits on a stretch of Washtenaw Avenue that sees a lot of traffic, and if you're not turning into its driveway, you may not notice it as you navigate the narrow lanes to and from downtown. The Hoover Mansion sits tall on its own little hill, built in 1917 by Leander J. Hoover, owner of the Hoover Steel Ball Company. The French chateau-style mansion once sat on 24 acres and included a gazebo and greenhouse. It boasted its own theater and ballroom on the 3rd floor, and all told cost $350,000 to construct. That period's money.
Yeah,
not
today's money.
It'd be so much more. Unfortunately, Hoover wasn't able to enjoy much time in his grand mansion. He passed away in 1918 of influenza, and his family didn't stay long afterward. Quoting from aadl.org, something you are going to hear us say a lot tonight and every night on the podcast.
In 1922, the house was purchased by the Kappa Sigma fraternity. It was vacant during the 1930s, and in 1945, it was almost razed by the city. Instead, Mr. and Mrs. Carol Benz purchased it at auction in 1946. Cannot imagine. They renovated it and later sold it to Tau Delta Phi. Do not do Greek. The fraternity in 1950. In 1968, the house became the headquarters for Youth for Understanding, a cultural exchange program for students worldwide. And then when YFU moved to Washington, D.C. in 1978, the house again stood empty. Later that year, the house received a cosmetic makeover as a, quote, designer showcase to raise funds for Mott Hospital. In 1983, the Patent Corporation bought the mansion and leased it to General Automotive Corporation. The house and its sweeping front lawns, as impressive as the house itself, have been renovated and the original carriage house reunited with the property. And currently it's owned by University Bank, so it's had a lot of owners. There she is.
Back in the 1980s, it was Group 243 Inc., an advertising firm, and that's where a lot of the ghost sightings we came across are from. The most popular sighting seems to be of Leander Hoover himself, which was the previous photo. Old employees have said they've seen a man in 1900s dress standing on the back porch. One written account from a photo posted on Flickr described there being shadow people that felt quote-unquote dark. Other reports from the same photo talk about doors opening by themselves, lights going on and off, and more than once an unplugged copy machine decided to get some work done on its own. From MLive, quote, other previous tenants said they felt cold spots, heard footsteps going up and down the stairs when no one else was in the building, and heard the copier machine turning on and off, even if it was unplugged. So, man, those ghosts like to get some work done.
Good, better than me. And Leander isn't the only specter to be found in Ann Arbor, by a long shot. The Gandy Dancer is an incredibly popular restaurant with an excellent brunch menu, if anyone has been. And it also comes with a historic and deep past. The Michigan Central Railroad Depot was built in 1886, and the Gandy Dancer is part of that now. A 1991 article from the Ann Arbor Observer describes it well. Quote, the inside was elegant with stained glass windows, red oak ceilings and trim, and French tile floors, and even separate waiting areas for men and women. Ivy grew up the side of the building, petunias and carnations were planted around it, and a fountain spurted at the point of a triangular garden just east of the baggage shed, where the Gandy Dancer's valet parking lot is now. In the 1880s, gardens were considered an important element in railroad station design. After all, the station was the first impression visitors received of the town, end quote.
According to an anonymous, quote-unquote, well-respected employee quoted in MLive, it was used as a temporary holding place for soldiers who died during World War I, where they sat until they were claimed. Those that weren't were stored in the basement. We weren't able to find anything of substance, actually, on that. It's possible this was a thing that happened at many depots across the country. We just don't have any articles to back it up.
But, yeah, entirely possible.
But it might.
Entirely possible. Many celebrities of the time passed through the Central Depot, including Winston Churchill, Victor Borgia, Meredith Willson, Gene Krupa, Benny Goodman, and Pablo Casals. After World War II, cars became the most popular way, of course, to travel. Although in the 1960s, Kennedy and Nixon stopped through on their whistle-stop tours, but really that was about the end of the railroad era, I will say. In 1970, it was sold to Chuck Muir, and the Gandy Dancer, named after a slang term for railroad workers, was established.
So Chuck Muir, pictured here, his story might be as fascinating as the Gandy Dancers. All accounts say that he was a congenial man, and he owned a lot of restaurants across multiple states. He was a millionaire and vacationed in the Bahamas regularly. He was an experienced and avid sailor with his own boat named Charlie's Crab, which was his first restaurant in Florida. And then suddenly, along with his wife and 2 other friends, he disappeared during bad weather while sailing from the Bahamas in a 40-foot sailboat, which is right along the edge of the Bermuda Triangle. I'm just going to throw that out there.
It was called a freak storm and the storm of the century, and it hit Florida hard in March of 1993. I think I remember this, actually.
Do you?
Yeah. Because it was a freak storm. It was the storm of the century.
Fair enough.
Obviously. So there was some $500 million in damages across the state in 1993 money. And one newspaper reported snow in the Panhandle. So it was a freak storm. Susan Muir, Chuck's daughter, told the Tampa Bay Times that her father knew better than to sail when bad weather was coming, but friends that were with him and his wife wanted to make a party back in Florida, so they set sail a day earlier than planned.
Not a good idea. There were 2 911 calls from Charlie's Crab the night of March 13th. Both were nothing but static. And the next day, the boat and its 4 occupants were gone, wiped out completely. Multiple papers say that nothing of the wreckage was found, not a scrap of clothing or a piece of the boat, and none of the 4 were ever seen or heard from again.
So we don't have any names to go with the sightings of paranormal at the Gandy Dancer. It doesn't seem like anyone wants to be like officially attached to these stories, but there are many. And so we'll talk about that. Actually, there was an MLive article about it, so we'll talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
People have seen lights turn upside down, glasses fly off shelves, a quote-unquote well-dressed man has been seen within the restaurant, and we wonder if there isn't still some soldiers perhaps left over from World War I. If that story turns out to be true, probably not. We don't know. It's possible.
And, maybe it's Chuck.
Yeah, a well-dressed man. I mean, he seemed to be a pretty flashy guy.
That's not to say soldiers never saw the station, alive or dead, as you saw in the previous picture, or a previous picture. It was the main station in the area, and plenty of soldiers said goodbye to their loved ones on their way to war. As a major place of transition, there could be people waiting to board or waiting for someone to arrive. Places that see a lot of transition, like a train depot or a hospital, are often referred to as liminal spaces. They attract an energy there that doesn't exist in more static places, and it's been theorized that such transitional energy lends itself well to the manifestation of ghosts and spirits. So it's possible that nothing significant could have actually ever happened at the Gandy Dancer, and it still hosts to large amounts of energy that we can feel.
And their owner disappeared mysteriously in the Bahamas. So our next stop isn't technically in Ann Arbor, but I'm betting a lot of people are familiar with it. And it's the Dicksboro General Store. It's been a staple of this town for quite a while. It's been around since 1840, actually, the building, not necessarily the business. It started as a general store, providing a stop between Detroit and Ann Arbor along Plymouth Road, which was then the main route between Detroit and Ann Arbor. From 1890 to 1905, it was a post office and barber. Then in the 1920s, it became a gas station, with the second floor acting as a dance hall. Dance halls were really big back then. Those original floors are still there today, actually. You can see them. And it closed briefly during World War II, but opened back up in 1947 as a general store, complete with hot dog stand out front. In the 1960s, it became an antique store, and in the 80s, it was bought by the goods and became what we know today, once again, a general store.
I could use that hot dog cart outside, though.
They should totally have a hot dog cart outside.
It's on my way to work. I would just stop, hot dog, go. The story of the Dicksboro ghost is a fascinating one. To be clear, the house we're talking about is not the same building as the general store, but used to exist. It's gone now. It was about 100 yards to the south of the store, but it's the store that's the active one, but the story takes place next door.
Yeah, same land.
Yeah, same land. Okay, let's see. The version of this story we're going to tell comes from the general store's website itself. So they too love to talk about what happens.
So in the summer of 1835, a young widow, Martha Crawford, and her small son Joseph came from Canada to visit Martha's sister Anne. Martha was immediately attracted to Anne's brother-in-law John and quickly made wedding plans. But when Anne told Martha a secret about her future husband, Martha quickly broke the engagement and tried to flee back to Canada. Anne's husband, James, told Martha that if she refused to marry John, she would never reach Canada alive. And the secret to this day has never been learned. But it is central to the story. And Anne actually died shortly after Martha's wedding. Martha's husband, John, died in 1840, and within a year of his death, Martha developed the same symptoms that had caused her sister's death. There was an obvious feud between Martha and her brother-in-law James over property that belonged to the deceased John, and Martha's illness prompted James to take advantage and declare her incompetent to the court so he could be appointed administrator of John's will. It's very sordid. A quick decline in Martha's health was blamed on the greedy James, and she bordered on insanity. Finally, Martha sought help in 1845 from Dr. Sam Denton at the University of Michigan. She told the doctor she will tell him her secret if he would in turn bleed her to death. He agreed to listen to the story and tricked her by saying his lancet had broken and was unable to bleed her to death but would keep her secret. Martha became hysterical, crying out that they would kill her. She died soon after, and the community accepted her death as a result of ill health, but never forgave James for his cruel harassment.
Dun, dun, dun. In the fall of 1845, Isaac Van Wert, his wife, and 2 small sons arrived in Dixboro in hopes of finding work and a place to live. The Van Werts rented the house that Martha had died in from her now 15-year-old son, Joseph, and within a few nights he witnessed something very frightening. Isaac reported in a sworn statement in Ann Arbor a few weeks later that as he was walking through his yard one night, he saw a light through the window. Quote, "I put my hand on the windowsill and looked in. I saw a woman with a candlestick in her hand in which was a candle burning. She held it in her left hand. She wore a loose gown, had a white cloth around her head, her right hand clasped in her clothes near her waist. She was bent forward, her eyes large and much sunken, very pale indeed. She moved slowly across the floor until she entered the bedroom and the door closed. I then went up and opened the bedroom door, and all was dark. I stepped forward and lighted a candle, but saw no one, nor heard any noise, except just before I opened the bedroom door, I thought I heard one of the bureau's drawers open and shut."
I spoke of what I had seen several days after, and then learned for the first time that the house in which I lived had been previously occupied by Widow Mulholland, and that she died there. The second time I saw her was in October, about 1 o'clock in the morning. As I opened the bedroom door, it was light in the outer room. I saw no candle, but I saw the same woman that I had seen before. I was about 5 feet from her. She said, "Don't touch me not." I stepped back a little and asked her what she wanted. She said, "He's got me. He robbed me little by little until they killed me. They killed me. Now he has got it all." I then asked her who had it all, and she said, "James. Yes, James has got it at last, but it won't do him long. Joseph, oh Joseph, I wish Joseph would come away." Then all was dark and still.
Van Wert saw her 6 more times, all in varying states of distress. More than once she appeared with, quote-unquote, a man he knew, or a couple of men, in their arms or otherwise incredibly upset. All the while she gave Van Wert more tiny pieces of the story. Quote, "James can't hurt me anymore," or Joseph, I fear something will befall my boy."
And not all of these encounters were at night. The 5th time Van Wert saw Mrs. Mulholland, it was just after sunrise, and she was in his front yard. And he was the only one to have these experiences with her. His wife never awoke when they happened in bed, and he was alone in the house when she appeared to him otherwise. But as the encounters went on, Mrs. Mulholland seemed to be acting out her death. She grew increasingly visibly ill, for a ghost, until she finally gave him the crux of her story.
Quote, "The 7th time I saw her, I was working at a little bench. I wanted to tell James something, but I could not. I asked her what she wanted to tell. Oh, he did an awful thing to me. I asked her who did. Oh, he gave me a great deal of trouble in my mind. Oh, they killed me. I asked her if she had taken anything that had killed her. She said, oh, I don't. I don't. The froth in her mouth seemed to stop her utterance. Then she said, oh, they killed me. I asked her, who killed you? I will show you, she said. Then she went out the back door near the fence, and I followed her. There I saw 2 men whom I knew standing. I saw them begin at their feet and melt down like lead melting until they were entirely melted. Then a blue blaze 2 inches thick burned over the surface of the melted mass. Then all began bubbling up like lime slacking. I turned to see where the woman was, but she was gone.
Eventually, Mrs. Mulholland told Van Wert who had done the terrible deed. She told him flat out it was James. But she seemed especially tired, like she'd used all of her energy just to get the words out. Mulholland muttered, I wanted to tell a secret, and I thought I had. And then she was gone. And the Van Werts moved out of the house the next day.
Unsurprisingly.
I'm surprised it took this long.
I know. Well, the 8th time was the last.
Ninth
time was the last time. Some believed that Van Wert's imagination had run away with him, but others argued that he was a man of good character and a member of the Dixboro Methodist Church. When Van Wert's statement was released to the public, the residents of Dixboro demanded that Martha's body be disinterred to determine if she had died of poisoning, and it was done. At a coroner's inquest in January of 1846, a verdict was handed down stating that the deceased had died of poisoning, quote, administered by some person unknown, end quote. I mean, we kind of know. Frayn's Lake and the well at Main and Mill Streets were searched for bodies, but none were found. While there was no concrete evidence to prove that James Mulholland was guilty, he disappeared from the area and was never seen again. His property was sold at a sheriff's sale in 1852. Gee, I wonder why he left.
Clearly the actions of an innocent man. Joseph, upon reaching the age of 21, was owner of his mother's property. In the 1850 census, he was listed as a farmer living in Superior Township and owning property worth $1,000.
There are a few versions of this story floating around, but they all tell the same general tale: a woman killed by a man with a secret to hide. This isn't the only legend where someone appears as a ghost to try to bring their killer to justice, but it is quite amazing that we here in Ann Arbor have our very own. And according to an article in M Life back in 2008, Mrs. Mulholland is still making herself known around the store.
Quote, store owner Steve Danny says staff and customers alike have been encountering the ghost since the store opened 17 years ago. We've had customers come right up to us and say, do you have a ghost here? Danny said. And we go, yeah. And they say, well, I just saw her. And Mimi Updegrove, in her book, Ann Arbor Area Ghosts, writes that an unopened box of jam jars already had pricing stickers on them when the box was opened. And the handwriting on the price stickers didn't match any known employees. Stable items have fallen to the floor, and others moved when no one was around to move them.
But that's not the only ghost associated with the store. According to the store website and our favorite website, WFMK 99.1, quote, on the site where the house stood, the 100 yards from the store, there was also a tavern with a well. One night, a peddler stopped to stay for the night, but was missing by morning. All his goods, wagon, and horse were still there, but he was never found. It is believed that he was murdered and dumped in the well, which was filled in not long afterwards by either John, James, or both. They were suspected to be the ones who eliminated the peddler, but there was never proof, end quote. And Dixboro General Store's website says, quote, Emmett Gibb, who ran the store from 1924 and continuing for many years, told a reporter in the 1960s that on a still, cold night, one might still hear the tinkle of the peddler's bell if one listened carefully.
That last part about the peddler is rumor and speculation, but we know for sure Martha Mulholland died under suspicious circumstances. This is all very much documented. And we found the coroner's inquest, so yeah, she was definitely poisoned.
Yeah.
And the coroners were extremely adamant that Martha's ghost showing up to Van Wert had absolutely nothing to do with their decision to exhume her body. Not at all.
Okay, sure. Yeah. If you say so.
Very clear about it.
Okay. But how cool. So I love that part of the research. We hear a story, we do a little digging, mostly thanks to AADL, and bam, evidence had happened. Yep. Well, evidence that Martha's death was suspicious, but we all know who did it. Come on. Yeah. Come on.
What, innocent men don't just flee the scene and leave all of their stuff behind?
Leave all of his stuff behind? What?
So our next stop is unfortunately out of business. Some of you may recognize it. But the stories were really too good to pass up, so we have to share them. The Ann Arbor Brewing Company brew pub occupied 114 East Washington Street from 1995 to 2020. So they had a decent run in this location, I mean. It, like so many other small businesses, suffered greatly during the 2020 shutdown and ended up moving locations when their lease came up. But we still have a few spooky stories to tell about the old building it operated in.
And you can still kind of visit them by going to Corner Brewery in Ypsi, so yeah, that's nice.
Completely gone.
They're not completely gone. They're just closer to us now. Sweet. We live in Ipsy. Megan Muma. I do this every time. You would think I would learn this poor woman's last name, but I haven't. Megan Muma has been working at the Ann Arbor Brew Pub since 2013 and says she started hearing stories about ghosts her first day on the job, Michigan Daily writes. The haunting of the building began with mist in the game room and the basement, which soon progressed to staff members seeing a man wearing what they described as a mailman's uniform, walking around the game room, the dart area, and the brewing side of the basement. At some point, they figured out that this was the location of a murder, Mama said. She was referring to the murder of Clifford Stang, an off-duty police officer who was shot dead on the property, at that time the Conlin and Weatherby clothing store in 1935, after witnessing a robbery in progress. One of the two robbers, William Shorty Paget, was arrested a year later. The other was never found. So that part is definitely true. Officer Stang was murdered in 1935. Do the thing. That's Officer Stang. And the killers were indeed never found. Findagrave.com says that the man convicted of the murder twice was actually innocent, and his time was commuted 8 years into his life sentence.
And that's not the only wild thing to happen in the building's history. In 1908, ABC was the Star Theater. There was a student riot after it was found out the manager of the theater and owner of a pool room on State Street approached a Star University of Michigan football player and convinced him to throw a big game for money. Don't mess with you and football.
No.
There we go. Well, the student body was outraged, and they advised the theater manager to close his place for good. After 1 week, the theater was still operating, so on March 16th, 1908 in the evening, the students assembled and came to the theater in a body. They demanded that the manager come before them, but he had made his exit through the rear door. Smart man. A building was being constructed across the street on the north side of East Washington Street, east of the alley. About 3 carloads of brick were stacked on the sidewalk in front of the building being constructed, and the students made use of the bricks.
Yeah, they did.
Bricks were hurled continuously until the theater was demolished inside as well as outside. The riot lasted all night, and futile attempts were made by the police, firemen, and university officials to stop it. 62 arrests were made that night, and the police received injuries. I'm sure a lot of people received injuries. The fire department's equipment was damaged likewise, and so were streetcars, end quote. And that quote is also from AADL's website. A total of 3,000 students rioted that night and left the Star Theater a lump of debris and brick.
3,000. Oh my God. Don't mess with football. That's all I learned. That's what I learned from this story.
First thing I learned when I moved here.
Don't mess with football. So that's a lot of energy pumped into a place at one time. And bricks. It's theorized ghosts or spirits, or whatever you want to call them, manifest in locations filled with energy, like the Gandy Dancer. They use this to strengthen themselves, and that's why there are more hauntings in buildings with tumultuous or tragic pasts. So this could be a reason ABC was, and possibly is, because we haven't talked to the folks in there now, full of haunts. But hold on, we have more. A woman in Victorian dress has been seen more than once in the old brew pub. From Michigan Daily, quote, caretaker James Gertz, also known as Mr. Largebeat, started working here right when it opened and claims to have seen a Victorian woman walking through the kitchen and the other side of the restaurant. An impression of the Victorian woman's visage can be witnessed even during the non-creepy hours in one of the wooden booths at the brew pub, where another staff member stenciled her silhouette. Alas, we can't go see her anymore, but poltergeist activity has been witnessed and documented in the restaurant as well, with one employee coming in one morning to find pots and pans strewn all over the place. Review of the CCTV footage didn't show another employee having a fit, but the utensils moving on their own, and I wish that we could see that video.
I know. Always these claims of video, I never see the video.
I wish, I know, but they're never posted anywhere. I'm so sad. Okay, our next stop is one we're sure you'll be familiar with. at least the name and the building itself, if not the legends surrounding it. Henry DeWitt Bennett was the postmaster in Ann Arbor for most of the 1850s. He had this beautiful Greek Revival home built in 1853. In 1886, after a short career as the steward of U of M, he sold his home and retired in California. In the 1890s, Reuben and Pauline Kempf bought the house and began their lives as beloved townies in Ann Arbor. From Wikipedia, quote, both Reuben and Pauline Kempf were musicians, and their home turned into a local center for the musical arts, end quote. Pauline taught piano in the home's front parlor, and you can still sit at and even play her piano where it has sat for over 100 years.
I've been. It's really cool. Nothing weird happened to me, unfortunately.
Oh,
I know.
Okay.
Both Pauline and Reuben were raised in Ann Arbor. Pauline on 4th Avenue and Reuben on a farm that used to stand where Briarwood Mall now is. They both studied music, Reuben even getting his education in Stuttgart, Germany, and bonded over their shared interest. Quoting from Grace Shackman's article on the Kempfs from May 1990 Observer, quote, besides giving lessons in their studio, the Kempfs were very active musically in the community. Pauline was the first choir director of the Congregational Church, and Reuben also music director of the University Glee Club and the Michigan Union Opera, and organist of the Ann Arbor Masonic groups. Because Reuben had connections in both the town and university communities, UM President James Angel asked him to form a singing society in an attempt to bridge the gap between town and gown. Under Reuben's direction, the group first called the Beethoven Society and then Lyra Gessenvierian?
Languages we don't know.
Singing Society. Gave regular concerts for the next 35 years, end quote.
Still quoting from that same article, Reuben Kempf died in 1945 at age 86. Pauline stayed on until her death in 1953 when the house was sold to Mr. and Mrs. Earl V. Parker. When Earl Parker died in 1969, the newly created Historic District Commission spearheaded a movement to convince the city to buy the house, end quote. Since then, it has been recreated to look almost exactly the way it did when Pauline and Reuben lived there, keeping their legacy alive for future generations to come. It seems the Kempfs may not have left their home or the city they adored. There have been several reports over the years of people witnessing strange things within the home. The immense feeling of love and adoration has taken over investigators as they stood in the front parlor, home to Pauline's piano. People have felt strong, frustrated energies wash over them. And some paranormal investigators have caught EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, using a recording device that said that spirits, even if we can ask them questions, and even if we can't hear them in like real time, their voices get picked up on recorder, and you can go back and like hear what people have said. They have heard EVPs responding to their questions. Pauline's name has been heard by several folks in the building, both in person and over a recording. And one source says that the piano plays by itself, but I was only able to find that in one book, so that might not totally be a thing. It might have just happened once. Who knows?
Yeah. Overall, it kind of seems like the Kempfs haven't left the community. And, I mean, why would they? They did really well here, and their home is beautiful. I highly recommend visiting it. It's like right over there.
Yeah.
It's right by the library.
Yes.
And it's beautiful inside.
Yeah.
I loved it. We went there actually on a library field trip.
Yeah. It's so gorgeous. Do the thing. This is them redoing the house, I believe, in the 80s. And you can see some wonderful safety happening right there.
Some ghosts wanting to happen.
Okay. I'm going to take over for a second and talk a little true crime. So we're going to take a trip next door to Ypsi, though there are still connections to U of M because there are always connections to U of M. Some of you may even remember when this happened or be familiar with the name John Norman Collins. He was a serial killer operating from 1967 to 69 and may have killed up to 9 women, one in California, before he was finally caught. He preyed on young women, mostly from U of M, and a few from local high schools and one middle school, leaving their bodies for unsuspecting people, sometimes children, to find on LaForge Road, Geddes, North Territorial, and Earhart. Collins was a brutal man and didn't take rejection well. The police did we'll call it a less than stellar job trying to catch the killer, but once they did, on July 31st, 1969, Collins was taken into custody and put on trial. He was only convicted of one murder, that of Karen Sue Beineman, but there have been more recent DNA tests that may give police more evidence that he is truly guilty of killing the other women, including the California one. For now, he sits in Marquette Branch Prison, where I think we can all agree he belongs.
Yep.
But of course, it wouldn't be creepy enough to have it end there. Since these poor women's deaths, people have seen specters and spirits along the roads where they were found. LaForge Road has its very own hitchhiking ghost, that of a young woman who walks alongside the road late at night near the old farmhouse and silo where the body of Mary Flesher was found. It said if you drive by her, the trunk of your car inexplicably pops open. No idea why. It just does. I don't know. I don't know. I could speculate, but why? And on a stretch of Geddes Road in Ypsi, the apparition of a woman in a nurse's uniform walks down the road late at night. When you pass her, she disappears. We couldn't find any nurses who died near Geddes. But hey, that doesn't mean there isn't a ghost wandering around. If it's like a white nurse's uniform, ladies in white are a very common spectral phenomena. So,
yep, walking along roads.
This is really just to say, let's just do our best to not forget that these were real people with real lives. It's fun to get caught up in the ghost stuff. But if there are spirits of murdered women still wandering Geddes, we should remember to think of them as people and treat them with respect. This goes for all encounters, I think, but
Right.
this is particularly personal and like really close to home. So,
Yeah. And it wasn't that
Anyway.
long ago.
and
Not
it
really.
wasn't that long ago. Anyway, those were where the unfortunate women were found. So, if you ever happen to find yourself driving Geddes in LaForge late at night, let me know what happens.
Yeah, a lot of people have told us that weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
Two
yeah,
people we
not
talked to said they refused to drive down LaForge. I think it was at night.
Yes. Anytime
Yeah.
after, I believe, 11 p.m., they will not drive down LaForge.
So we're going to take a detour now to Cobblestone Farm and on Packard. I'm sure many of us have driven by there. The land itself has been a farm since at least the 1820s and was continuously a farm well into 20th century. Per Wikipedia, quote, in 1835, Maynard sold the property to Herman Tickner, who purchased it on behalf of his brother, naval surgeon Dr.
The names of these folks are fantastic.
They really are. I'm going to say Benijah
Sure.
Tickner.
Why not?
That same year, Heman Tickner constructed a small frame house on the property. In 1844, Benijah Tickner built the Cobblestone Farmhouse.
And I was saying it Benajah, so
I have no idea.
I don't know. Benajah. Who knows? But it's fantastic. Heman, Benajah, and both their families lived on the farm, growing everything from cereal to making cheese and honey. Tragically, the Tickners lost 11 of their 12 children, all to different illnesses.
Cannot imagine.
They had an entire room in the house that they just turned into a hospital because almost every single one of their children had to spend their last days in it. When Benajah died in 1858, his extensive medical library from his travels with the Navy was donated to the University of Michigan. Told you everything has to do with the university. Yeah. The Booths purchased the house from Benajah's widow. Don't know how to say this name.
Gesha?
In 1860. Just great names all the way around. And lived in the house until 1880. In their time there, they added on a circular carriage drive, Italianate-style porch, and a 2-tiered iron fountain fed by a nearby stream.
Fancy.
I know.
Unfortunately, a fire struck the farm in 1924, destroying many of the outbuildings on the farm, effectively ending the livelihood of the Campbell family who lived there at the time. They saved the Cobblestone Farmhouse, clearly. And they threw basically wet blankets on the roof in order to save it.
Yep.
But the blaze dried up all their water reserves. It was a very big fire.
Yeah.
The family stayed on, however, and the farm wasn't sold to the city of Ann Arbor until 1972. And by the last Campbells living on the property, it was restored in 1974 with the help of the Cobblestone Farm Association, and today it functions as a museum and event space, and it's gorgeous.
It's so pretty. According to Beverly J. Rydell and Kathleen R. Tedson, authors of Haunted Travels of Michigan, a fantastic book series we highly recommend. And we've met Kat, and she's lovely. Cobblestone Farm has several spooky things happening on its grounds. A woman has been seen looking out of an upper story window. A man sits in the dining room on occasion, and a little boy who supposedly drowned in the well has been seen running around.
During Rydell and Tetz's investigation of the farm, they gathered some interesting evidence. In the barn, built directly on top of the original that burned down, so not the original, they had a fruitful question and answer session, we'll say, asking questions of who or whatever was in there to respond with knocking. At first, they weren't sure it was something intelligent answering their questions, but the knocks only happened directly after they asked yes or no questions. When they asked the spirit, however, if they minded the team being in the barn with them, they got a simple 2 knocks, so no. And when they didn't leave immediately, they got a knock so thunderous it shook the entire barn.
Still, they remained and asked more questions, like you do. The team asked if the spirit speaking to them had anything to do with starting the 1924 fire. The temperature started to rise. Their EMF meter started registering higher and higher levels of electric fields in the air. Hair on their arms stood on end. The temperature rose from 73 degrees to 87 degrees.
They didn't check their recorders as they investigated, so when they reviewed the evidence, they received quite a shock. This was days later, I think.
Yeah.
The investigation team had caught several EVPs, it turns out. To quote from Rydell and Tedson's book, "It began when Sue turned to Ray and said, 'I'm sorry, I can't remember your name.' Ray responded. What no one heard, however, was the other response, the whispered, 'Winona.' Seconds after that, 'Go back.'"
They got several names, including Jay Tickner, Ben, and Buck Wiener, in addition to the Winona. But nothing compared to the jolting knocks, the entire shaking of a barn that they received.
And last but certainly not least, we would like to talk a little, maybe a lot, about crazy wisdom.
A lot.
Yeah. It's currently not possible to explore the claims for ourselves, at least for now, but we both worked there, and we wanted to dig into the building's history and talk about our own experiences, because there are plenty.
Oh, there's so many.
I can't say for certain what's behind them, but a lot of definitely strange things happen in that building. And when the store opens again, maybe people can investigate. But Crazy Wisdom opened on Main Street in 1999, having moved from its previous location on 4th Avenue. But the building itself has been around since at least 1857. These are the oldest pictures we could find in the archives. The first occupants were another name Ann Arborites might recognize, Hutzel and Company. From the Bentley Historical Library, quote, "When August Hutzel opened his store at 114 South Main Street in 1857, he sold groceries along with glass and painting supplies. As the city's gas and water works expanded, many hardware businesses added plumbing and heating equipment. In the 1880s, Hutzel laid miles of cast iron pipes for the city's first water system. August's son Titus, trained as a plumber, sold and installed indoor plumbing, including flush toilets and clawfoot bathtubs." End quote. And it's amazing. They've been going ever since. They're still
can't
going
believe
strong.
they're still around.
See their vans driving around.
Yeah. There are rumors that the upstairs was a speakeasy during Prohibition, but we're not able to corroborate the stories with any hard evidence, as is the case with a lot of speakeasies. That's kind of the point. So it could have been.
Yeah,
who knows?
That side of town. That side of town was very German, and they really didn't want to give up their beer.
They did not. In the 50s, the building was a Singer sewing store, perhaps. That's the only Singer I'm aware of. Although there's not much information on it. And then we travel all the way until 1999. Crazy Wisdom moved in from their location on 4th Avenue. Since then, it's been a staple bookstore in the community, possibly for more than just its corporeal residents. And And we're sure, and a lot of us miss it very much.
Yeah, waiting for it to come back.
Yeah.
It might not be surprising that a place with that amount of energy like Crazy Wisdom has had a lot of supernatural stories attached to it. So we'll get into some. According to a longtime employee, quote, "The business before us was Mayor Scherer, the original owner who built it, haunts the speakeasy and the tea room where he died. There was a 15-year-old who worked there when it was a paper company in the 1800s who was crushed to death. That was on the Venology side." End quote.
So the Mayor Share was actually the building next door to Crazy Wisdom, as you can see, which is 112 South Main. Crazy Wisdom itself was Ann Arbor Cut Rate Clothing, and the Singer store, we think.
Yeah. It just says Singer.
It's hard to find the history of this building for some reason. It's been so hard. But as far as we know, the only documented death happening in the vicinity of Crazy Wisdom was in 2013 when a man was found dead in the alley behind the store.
Yeah, when the manager opened up the newspaper and was like, wait a minute, that alley looks familiar.
Yeah.
I was there at the time.
Yeah.
So whatever the history, some odd things have happened to a lot of us. One of the first things that I was told when I began working there in 2012 was that the water taps in the tea room will turn on by themselves in the middle of the night when no one's there. And everyone was so frustrated because it was expensive and wasteful. I mean, the taps would turn on full blast and they'd go for like 6 hours. Nobody wants that, especially in Ann Arbor. We're better than that. The only explanation that was offered to us, because we had it looked at several times, was that the taps were loose, and then, like, when we left, and then trucks would go by in the middle of the night and rattle them, and then they would turn on, even though trucks aren't allowed on Main Street.
Yeah.
Not on that part of Main Street, I should say.
Fishy.
Yeah. And it was a while before I experienced this myself, but I did eventually. One night I was the last person to leave, and I was the first person to come in the next morning, and yeah, the water was full blast. It was not dripping, it was full blast. So that was freaky.
That's fun.
That was great. And I had to twist the knob several times to turn them off, so not cool. And my first actual experience was actually probably a few weeks into the job. I was upstairs shelving books that customers had left astray, and the tea room person was kind of finishing up, ready to leave. And I said I would turn the lights off and close the second floor for them, because usually 2 people close. It's not a very large building. But then as soon as they were gone, I started to feel like this weird presence in the room. It's like the only way I can describe it. And it was like a very heavy, almost like electric feeling. And I noticed the lights over the front counter and like kind of behind it, they're all antique lights, were flickering. And I thought, okay, well, it's an old building. Maybe it's just old wiring or something. So I wasn't really worried. And I finished up, turned off the lights, closed down the building. And then the next day I came in and I asked a longtime tea room employee if the lights over the counter were known to flicker. And he looked at me like I was nuts and was like, no. So awesome.
Crazy person.
Yeah, thanks for that. And one night after close, the tea room employee came down the stairs to the main floor looking just like pale and terrified, like she had seen a ghost. And she'd been counting down the drawer in the tea room, turned away for a moment, and while her back was turned, a piece of the lighting fixture above the register just like fell and shattered on the keyboard. And she looked up and saw that the light, it was like an antique chandelier kind of thing, it was swinging back and forth. And the windows up there don't open, so there was no wind. There couldn't have been a wind. They'd never moved before. Like, they're pretty stable lights. And it's in a kind of frame, so it's unlikely that a piece of glass would have just fallen.
Yeah.
Like, they're very well made.
And like it hasn't since.
No, this is the only time when
Nothing's fallen out of
I
that
would say go
chandelier
look
since.
at them, except you can't.
Yeah.
And a customer once told me that she would often come into the store not really sure what she wanted to buy. So she would just kind of ask the store, like, hey, what should I read? And inevitably a book would just kind of fall off the shelf at her feet. And she would go, okay, and then she'd buy it.
This was also how I ended up choosing a tarot deck, because it fell on my head. And I said, okay,
Ouch.
I guess it's that one.
Ow.
Yeah, I know, it hurt. So an employee was shelving stray books upstairs when a couple of books fell off the shelf a couple shelves down. They were books that actually belonged downstairs. She felt as if it were someone trying to be helpful, letting her know that there were more books out of place. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, most people were pretty chill working there. You kind of had to be.
You kind of had to be. I mean, it's crazy wisdom.
Yeah. So possibly my favorite is the ghost cat.
Love the ghost cat.
Everyone loves the ghost cat. So one night while I was working with another coworker who self-identifies as a clairvoyant, and she's very knowledgeable of spiritual work. She'd been working for Crazy Wisdom for quite a while. And she and I saw a man come down the stairs from the tea room, just walking very quickly, very determinedly out the door. And a moment later, a woman came down after him and said, "Oh, have you seen, did a man just leave here? Did you see him?" And we said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, that was my boyfriend." And she went on to tell us that they had been having tea in the community room, which was on the second floor in the back, so like a more private area where you could sit. And they heard a menacing growl, is how she described it. So curious, she looked around to see if somehow there was an animal in the room or trapped on the fire escape outside the window, just the things that you would do if you heard a growl. But when no animal could be found, her boyfriend got spooked and literally fled the building. It was really funny. And then she was more curious than afraid, so she asked me to go upstairs with her, and I was like, heck yeah. And she showed me where it was. It was the back corner. It wasn't anywhere near the fire escape. It was near another window. And we just kind of shrugged. And I went back downstairs, and she went out to console her boyfriend because he would not come back in the building. And I returned to the front counter. My coworker asked me what it was, and I told her where it had come from. And she said that she had felt an energy from downstairs, and when she psychically investigated, she discovered the energy of a lost cat who had ridden in with someone and was now scared and confused. He was trapped in the building. And so she said that she used her spirit guides to help the animal kind of cross over and ate it. And after that, no one reported any more growling.
Nope. Yep,
So,
not since.
Yeah, that was just honestly, it was a pretty typical Friday night. Crazy
Yeah.
Wisdom.
It's kind of regular for Crazy Wisdom
Yeah,
Friday
it's pretty much
night.
par for the course. And another time I was in the basement by myself, which a lot of people are afraid of the basement. I'm one of the few people who's not afraid of the basement.
It feels weird.
It's kind of an old Michigan basement, sort of.
It just feels weird.
Yeah.
You always feel like you're being watched. And like you
Some
have
people feel that
to
way.
and each section, like it's a long basement, and each
Yeah.
section of basement has like separate lights. So like I would go down, I would reach around the corner, flip on all of the lights before I went in the basement.
Yeah.
to where my desk was, by
What's
the
wrong
way.
with it?
So I spent time down there.
And the elevator in that building is literally 100 years old. It was installed in the 1920s. So it's got the accordion door, and then like a hinge door on the outside. So I was unloading the elevator, and I heard on the other side of the hinge door, like little girls whispering and giggling. And like I have nieces, I know what that sounds like. And I thought, okay, there's one other person in this building. She's on the top floor. I'm 2 floors below her in the basement. I know I'm the only person down here. I know I'm going to look around the door and see nothing. I looked around the door, I saw nothing, and I went, great.
This is what I'm saying. It feels weird.
Yeah. But it wasn't threatening, so I just went on with my day. And then later I heard a couple employees talking about it, and I said, "Oh, you've heard the giggling too?" And they got really excited, like, "You've heard it too?" And so then we both felt better because we'd all heard it. And then I posted about it on Facebook, and other former employees came forth and said they'd also heard the giggling. And it sounds like 2 little girls conspiring, like giggling and laughing and whispering.
Nope.
I don't know. Should we jump ahead?
Sure. Let's see. Oh my gosh,
The
we're not
possessed
even
phones.
we're not even close to like. Yeah, we don't have a ton of time, so we're gonna skip ahead.
I'll just say,
Let's talk
the
about
phones were
let's talk about the phones.
oh my god, it was so frustrating. I hated it so much because they would just ring and no one would be there. They would ring from within the buildings. We had 3 or 4 lines.
Yeah.
That we could access on our phones. They're office phones. And I would get a call from like the manager's desk, And then I would pick it up. No one's there. I would call it back, and the manager would say, I didn't call you. And from the tea room, would call downstairs.
Yeah.
The basement would call upstairs. And sometimes the phone would screech. It was the most god-awful sound I've ever heard in my life, and that includes the alarm on the back door. And there's no reason for a phone to screech. Phones don't screech.
Not really.
This one did. And the only way to get it to shut up was to go on one of the other phones and call the main line.
Yeah.
And then it would ring through. It'd stop screeching, and then it would ring through.
Yeah.
AT&T was called out 1,000,000 times. They said there was nothing wrong with the phones, only that they were old. Old phones don't screech either. I'm 41 years old. I know what phones are like.
It's like, yeah, I don't think the old phones call each other either.
We even replaced the phone.
Yeah.
Just to be like, okay, AT&T, we'll get a new phone. It still did it.
No.
We'd still get phantom calls, and it would still screech.
Yeah. This would happen when I was alone on the first floor. Nobody was on the second because at the time that I worked there was post-pandemic, so we didn't use the second floor anymore. Yeah. And the only other person there was in the basement. I received a few calls from the manager desk, but no one was on the line. So I called my coworker in the basement, but her phone hadn't rung. She hadn't called me, and it happened several times because it would often be the two of us by ourselves in the building. All around working there was a lesson in the supernatural.
It was weird.
Not just because of the
a lot
books.
of people.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, but also a lot of people loved that part of it. That
yes.
it was,
yeah, absolutely.
That it was just weird.
Absolutely.
But I hope the spirits aren't too lonely while the store is closed, and then hopefully they'll be, I don't know, doing stuff when the store reopens. I don't know.
Books jumping off shelves.
You find what you need. Just try not to get hit in the head like I did.
Yeah, especially those. You can see those shelves are tall.
Yeah.
If those fall on your head, it's going to hurt.
Yeah, it did. But I took that tarot deck home because the store told me to.
Yeah. So we'll call that a wrap because it's just after 7:30.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed our little ghost tour of Ann Arbor. Oh, there she is. She's so pretty. Oh, miss you, store. If you want to follow us online, we are at Haunted Mitten on Facebook, Twitter.
Everywhere, baby. Yeah,
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Tumblr now.
Tumblr. I got bored and made a Tumblr.
Yep.
I was supposed to be doing other podcast things, and I made a Tumblr instead. And Blue Sky, which does not get updated nearly as often as it probably should.
It's experimental.
We're trying.
I do throw up all of the books that we use on our shop on bookshop.org/shop/Haunted Mitten. We get a lot of books through the library, actually. Yeah. And if you're familiar with Melcat, you can get so many books through Melcat. If you're not, you should familiarize yourselves with Melcat because you can get so many books through
Melcat. We do have a webpage that is sorely in need of updating. But there you will find links to all of the social media, our merch store, which is going to be getting an overhaul relatively soon, and our Patreon, where even $1 a month keeps us going. It pays for that website. So.
It does.
If y'all want to hang around for a couple minutes, we do. I'm going to say we have time for questions and answers. I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's only 7:35.
Library
you can't kick us out yet.
At 8. It's fine.
So, if any comments, questions, concerns. Yes.
They did. They closed, last spring? Not this last spring. I think the spring before.
The spring before.
But they have a new manager, and they don't have a date for reopening. But last I heard, they are trying to reopen.
They're doing their best.
Yeah. I do work for the Crazy Wisdom Journal also, so I have some insider information.
Yeah.
But hopefully they'll be reopening soon. It'll just be the main floor, though. The tea room will remain closed. They own it, actually.
Oh, yeah. No, that building is theirs.
They are extremely lucky in that they are on Main Street in Ann Arbor and own their own building.
Yeah.
If anybody else has a question, I would love to bring you the microphone. So
oh, yeah.
Show me
Thank you to our beautiful assistant.
Yeah. So point out who you want to talk to. Anybody? Over
here? I just wondered, do you do readings with the tarot cards that you got hit on the head with? And has anything happened weird with the readings that you did?
I have only done readings for myself. I'm still learning. A couple years on, I'm still learning because it turns out tarot is really complicated.
Extremely complicated.
I will just say that this tarot deck is kind of a jerk. They all have personalities. And this one is very blunt. So I don't think I would use it for readings for other people anyway. I have others that are much kinder in the way that they tell you things. This one, however, it fell on my head. So he's kind of a jerk. But
Got your attention.
It did. I actually, we're starting to do a lot more live events, and that includes like having vendor tables and things. And in the future, I would really like to try my hand at reading for others. At the moment, I just don't feel comfortable with the cards enough to do so. But yeah, no, nothing weird's happened other than that deck being way more blunt than it has any right to be for being a pack of cards.
Anyone else?
So not so much a question, but comment. I had firsthand experiences at the Kemp House. This was about 20 years ago, doing a group investigation there. We were there for about 2 hours, set up all our equipment, monitored everything, had nothing happen. End of the night, we're packing up, saying our farewells. We're like literally at the door, about to step outside. You can hear footsteps of somebody moving around upstairs, getting ready to go to bed. And then I also have a friend who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, but she volunteered there for a while, and she said lots of firsthand experiences, items disappearing and reappearing, stuff like that.
Oh, wow. I love how they waited until you were done. They're like, wait, make sure all of the recording equipment is off.
That's what I would do if I were a ghost. I would be a jerk.
I know you would. Yes.
Hi. I've heard that there was a, before Crazy Wisdom, I think the first, at least as far as I know, the first metaphysical bookstore in town was owned by some brothers called the Earlywine Brothers. They're related. One of them is the father of the popular Ann Arbor musician May Earlywine, who gets around the country and locally too.
Oh.
And I don't know the exact, I can't remember the exact address, but the Earlywine Brothers ran this bookstore, if I'm not mistaken, in the late 60s on Main Street somewhere. And I was just wondering, have you communicated with any of the Earlywine Brothers or the daughter about possibly their weird experiences of running this metaphysical bookstore in the hippie days, so to speak?
No, we'll have to ask Rachel about that.
I didn't even know that store existed.
Yeah, I bet Rachel knows.
I bet Rachel knows. Rachel knows everything.
Yeah. We also volunteer with the Ann Arbor Book Society. And Rachel, who was actually manager of Crazy Wisdom for 11 years.
And now who directs the
believe.
Friends of the Ann Arbor District Library. Yeah.
And so she and some other people in the society have been doing a lot of research into the bookstores in Ann Arbor in its history from like 1824.
Yeah.
So I'll bet she has a lot of information
I
on
bet
that.
she does too. Short plug for the A2 Book Society. You can get their newsletter every month and learn about those bookstores that we used to have. Yeah. So yeah, no. So the short answer, no. All right, sounds good. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.